Hello and welcome back to my channel. What I'm doing today is the read to write tag, which was created by Petrie, and she was very kind enough to tag me in her original tag video. The idea of this tag is that as writers we quite often list books or authors who have inspired our own writing, and I will admit I was thinking of doing a video on that topic. But this does give it a little bit more structure by just listing 10 different areas of writing and then listing books or authors that inspired you in those areas. So let's get on with it. So first up is books or authors that have inspired you when it comes to plot. And I admit I had to think about this one for a long time because I couldn't think of a single book that had directly inspired my plotting, probably because I don't think about it when I'm plotting, I just go and see what happens. But then I remembered The Animals of Farthingwood by Colin Dann. If you haven't heard of this book, it's not that popular anymore, I don't think. It's about a group of woodland animals who have to flee their homes when it's being destroyed to make room for a housing estate. And this completely mismatched bunch of animals basically take a vow not to eat each other on the way and go on a massive journey to a nature reserve where they're going to be safe. And this, I admit, I watched the cartoon before I read the books, but the number of little short stories I had to write for school that featured friendly animals helping each other out, even though they're natural enemies, was rather ridiculous, and I think it's all this book's fault. So next up we have character development, and there was of course one series that sprang straight to mind, and I think a lot of you will probably agree with me on this one, and that is the Song of Ice and Fire series by George R.R. Martin. His characters are so well rounded that even those I hate with a burning passion, and there are some of those, have very complex reasons and believable reasons behind their actions. And there are some characters that I didn't like at first, and now they are some of my favourites, and he is very good with the characters. And the other thing is that when Moon did the tag, she said that to her it meant characters that you just wonder what they're doing and feel like calling them up for a chat before you realise that they are fictional. And for me, that has to be the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett. I love his characters. They are, again, very believable people, a complete mishmash right across society. And I haven't read all of these, and I'm ashamed to admit that I haven't read all of them, but I have read a lot of them, and I adore these books as well. So next up we have books or authors that inspire you when it comes to voice. And again, like Moon, I am going to say The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy trilogy by Douglas Adams. This is a mashup of the first 4 books. I have got the 5th one over there. But yes, I love his narration style in these books. It's wonderful. One of the few sci-fi series that I actually really, really love. I'm much more into fantasy than I am into sci-fi, but this is a great series. And the other one I am going to mention is The To-Do List by Mike Gale. This is a true story about the author deciding that he wants to be a proper grown-up like his fancy next-door neighbours, and he comes up with a 1,277 item to-do list to complete by his next birthday. I mean, it's all normal, everyday grown-up things like writing a will and sorting out his email provider, but this book, I have reread it so many times and it still makes me laugh out loud every single time, like literally laugh out loud while I'm reading it. I have it on my Kindle, which is why I'm not showing you it. But yes, his narration style is wonderful, and this book is definitely worth checking out. So next up we have dialogue, and some of the books I've mentioned could have gone into this category, but there's one I'm going to give a shout out to, and that is the Circle of Magic series by Tamara Pierce. And the reason I thought of this one is because there is a scene in one of these books where a highborn character and a boy born on the streets are having a conversation, and he says something about, oh, stupid kid or poor kid or something like that. And the noble girl's instant reaction is, why is he talking about goats? And I loved the way that she put so much character development into those two sentences, and they told us so much about those two characters, and it's something that I definitely try to do when I'm writing dialogue, is to think about the slang people would use and things like that. So there is another book that I did love the dialogue in because it was so believable, but I'm going to mention that in a bit because I think it fits slightly better into the other category. So next up we have books or writers that have inspired you when it comes to setting. And yes, like Moon, I am going to have to say The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. I loved these books as a child. I still love these books. I first read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe about 30 years ago, and I still have to check every time I get a new wardrobe. Is this the one that means I can get to Narnia? Their setting is so magical. I spent large portions of my childhood talking to random animals in the hope that they'd talk back. Yes, very magical. And I think this is the first fantasy series that I read. It's certainly the first fantasy series I remember reading, so this is probably where it all started. And the other one that I have to give a very brief mention to when it comes to setting is Tamara Pierce's Tortal universe, which is a slightly different setting to her Circle series. But they are both medieval inspired, and this is the universe that got me into medieval history, and that is what has inspired large chunks of my current book in regards to setting, so it's all her fault. So next up we have books or writers that have inspired you when it comes to fight scenes. And as soon as this category came up, there was one book that sprang to mind instantly, because I don't tend to do one-on-one fight scenes so much in my book, but I do have battle scenes. And the one author who definitely inspires me when it comes to writing battles is J.R.R. Tolkien with The Lord of the Rings. In particular, there is one scene in The Siege of Gondor when they throw the heads over the wall that haunted me for years when I first read it. It was... and let's not forget that Tolkien lived through 2 world wars. He knew what he was talking about when he wrote his war scenes, and yeah, this is definitely a book I will be going back to when I get to that point. So next up, we have the complete opposite of that, and we have books or writers that have inspired you when it comes to romance. I am not a big romance writer, I am not a big romance reader, but there is one romance series that I do love, and that is Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. I think most people know what this is about, but just in case, it's about a World War II nurse who ends up accidentally going back in time and falling in love with a Highlander. And I love Claire and Jamie's relationship. I love this series. Yeah, I don't do romance in general, but I'll make an exception for this one because I love it. So next we have books or writers that have inspired you when it comes to emotion. And here we get into the book that I very nearly put in the dialogue section. And that is The Girl in the Green Dress by Kath Staincliffe. This is a book about a teenage girl who goes to her school prom and doesn't come back because she's murdered for being transgender. I cried reading this book. Properly cried. I don't cry at a lot of books. This is one of them. And there is one point in this book where there is a conversation between the murderer and another character, and I just wanted to reach through the pages and punch them in their stupid, bigoted faces. Lots of emotion going on with this book, and also because the dialogue in that conversation was so raw and so believable. I've met people like that. Unfortunately, I think a lot of you have probably met people like that. If you're interested in the subject matter, definitely pick this book up. But if you are triggered by transphobia, do take care with it, because it's a little too believable in some places. And the other book that I'm going to mention for emotion is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, and I hope I've pronounced that right. This is the only book, at least the only book I can remember, that I had to shut and put down halfway through because I couldn't cope. I was like, look, got to stop reading this right now. Can't read anymore just yet. Yeah, the emotions in this book are really good. I did finish it. I do love this book. I have the second one in a pile over there that I will be picking up very soon, and I am very much looking forward to the third one coming out later this year. Yeah, if you haven't read this book, it is really good, but be careful with it, because again, there are some themes in this book that some people won't be able to deal with. It's a little too emotional on that score for some people, but very well written book. So we're getting through them. Next we have books or writers that have inspired you when it comes to pacing or tension. And for me, that is books that you just can't put down. You have to keep turning the pages to figure out what's going to happen. And quite a few of the ones I have already mentioned do fall into that category. So I'm going to go with something totally different, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I read this last year, the year before. Couldn't put it down. It's not a particularly long book. It's only... yeah, it's only about 250 pages, but I flew through it. I had to know what happened in the end. I'm not going to go too much into plot on this one because I think a lot of people do know what it's about. But yeah, that was a good one. And thanks to my Facebook memories, I was reminded that a few years ago I once had to be reminded to get off the bus when I got to my stop on the way to work because I was too busy reading Edgar Allan Poe. His poetry is hauntingly beautiful, and his short horror stories are so gripping that I could not tear my eyes away from the page. Not so much with his sci-fi, I find. His sci-fi is not quite as gripping. But if you're looking for a good place to start, I do recommend The Black Cat. And if you have read that story, this was my Halloween costume from about 2 years ago. So yes, I love me some Poe. Finally, we have books or writers that have inspired you when it comes to theme. And there is one book and one series that sprang to mind for having themes that I've tried to include in my current book. And that is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley and the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan, of course finished by the brilliant Brandon Sanderson. So yes, those both deal with some interesting themes. So next, it is up to me to tag some more people. So I am going to tag Ariana Bagnata, and I really hope I've pronounced your name right. I did look up how to do it, and I hope I haven't just butchered that. Orla Hart and Hayley Bascom. And also, if you're watching this and you would like to do this tag and I haven't tagged you, then consider yourself tagged, because let's share the love and share those inspiring books. So leave me a comment if you have done this tag or you are planning to do this tag. What did you think? Did you agree with my choices on these categories, or do you have different books in mind that inspire you? Let me know. Leave me a thumbs up if you liked this video, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.